Today we have Mike Williams here joining us. Thanks so much for hopping on. If you just want to give a quick intro about who you are and what you're working on.
Well, thanks for having me. I had an IT background, worked in consulting for a little bit, went self-employed probably like 6-7 years ago, had some businesses in the event ticket space. I started with a couple buddies and kind of as those scaled, got introduced into NoCode. And for the last year or so, actually graduated from NoCode to more full code and low code stuff. And recently have been consulting and kind of exploring that realm of like kind of consulting and agency work. I spun up a little agency, Buildlab. That's kind of my project right now, trying to scale that up a little bit, get some people working under me, potentially designers, devs. So do kind of the hybrid of like code and no code stuff, basically.
Awesome. Well, there's quite a few things I want to talk about there. I guess we start with how you were introduced to NoCode. You said as your company was scaling, you find NoCode? Did people suggest solutions? How did you start hearing about it in that scenario?
Yeah, I mean, I think it's hard it feels like so long ago now, but basically it was like very transactional, my business at the time, a lot of little transactions all throughout the day. So I got to the point where I was outgrowing Excel as a data source. The workbook would take like 20 seconds just to even open, and I realized that wasn't going to work. I played around with an Access database for a while, which was kind of funny looking back, but I believe the first tool probably I ever found was Airtable, maybe. And this is when it was pretty new. I actually messed around with, there was another one I think called Fieldbook at the time. They ended up shutting down, but I started using Airtable just because I figured this was a good next step, a more robust like spreadsheet database hybrid. So started putting stuff in there. Shortly thereafter, I probably found Zapier, I think was the next step. And started doing text parsing stuff from emails. That was the first big thing I did because I had no API into my sales coming in, and it always frustrated me. So the only thing I had was these confirmation emails. So I ended up using Zapier's parsing tool and started dumping stuff into Airtable. And after that, I mean, it was just down the rabbit hole, really. Graduate a little bit into, and we can like, not to get too ahead, scaled up, like graduated to Integromat just for some heavier stuff, just because of task limits. And then eventually even outgrew Airtable, had to spin up a SQL DB. And then last year I've learned to fully code and do like full custom stuff and APIs. So that's kind of my journey there.
Yeah, it's interesting that like there's obviously it seems like there's a divide of like coders or no coders, but actually from like being behind the scenes, I can see that like 25% of our community are developers. Lots of developers love no code and understand the benefits of spinning things up really quickly and not having to redo the same things over and over again. And I often say to people that like what I've built with MakerPad and linking some of the things together with Zapier, I end up working with like webhooks and pulling in APIs, and like then you start recognizing the patterns of an API, or this thing connects to this thing, and actually then you see the benefit of like, okay, I want to push that a bit further or a bit further. And I think it's probably one of the best ways to start realizing you want to learn to code, or just one of the best ways to learn to code in the first place. What do you think about that?
Yeah, I mean, APIs are definitely a game changer once you start understanding those. Even no coders, like I feel like you have to learn at least API syntax at some point, just because. And that's all, Zapier and Integromat, all they're doing is wrapping APIs at the end of the day.
Yeah.
But yeah, that was definitely like a step I took there, and was kind of like, oh, okay, there's a lot you can do here. Um, but yeah, and then eventually setting up my own API, like setting up a little Express server. That was one of the first, I think, code projects I did. Learned a little bit of JavaScript just to have an endpoint to do like real heavy stuff, because I was even outgrowing Integromat, was getting a little price prohibitive, because I was doing like tens of thousands of tasks a day.
Whoa.
Taking from an API and dumping in a SQL. It was a really simple task, but it was just so many times a day that I figured this is probably worth me, taking a day to like learn how to set up a server.
Oh, awesome. So yeah, I guess you had the need for it, and then how long did it take you to learn to build that then with code?
I mean, the initial stuff, just like the Express server. So I started on Code Academy, by the way, for anyone who is kind of curious. That's just like a pretty cheap, easy way to kind of get your feet wet. And they cover Express in there, and making like API calls and stuff. And, surprisingly, that was pretty early when I was still kind of an idiot with the code stuff, but I think I set up the Express server in like a day. So it was surprisingly easy, and that really opened up a lot of doors, because I could push some real heavy stuff there, and not have to pay by the task kind of thing. And there are some alternatives to that. Serverless is a big thing, and we can talk about this a little later, but stuff like Firebase functions, and AWS has Lambdas.
Yeah.
I don't know if you've worked with those. And those are kind of a cool intermediary, where if you don't want to spin up your own server, I think I've provided those for a few heavy clients that I found those to be a real good combination with no code stuff as well.
Yeah. What is your, I guess, what's your take on the seemingly the code versus no code, or like the fine line between each of the types of people who end up using these things? I mean, I did a podcast on it ages ago, and it was like a debate one, but there wasn't a debate really. We both just sort of agreed, yeah, we're all trying to build something. This is
Yeah,
just
was that on Indie Hackers? I think I
yeah,
listened to that one. Yeah, who are you debating again?
I was
The
Sahil
the
Gumroad.
Gumroad guy, right? Okay, yeah. Yeah, so the way I see it, I definitely don't see it as a versus thing.
Yeah, yeah,
Just because of my journey, I wasn't coming from like a coder space where I was like, oh, this no code stuff's stupid. And I wasn't really firmly in the no code space either. I was just like, I need tools to do these things. And
yeah.
it's for my own business. So I don't care about like other people's opinion. I just want the best tool, So I just gradually started to realize that, a hybrid of these can very easily be the ideal setup. And especially working with clients, they really run the gamut on, I have some small clients who need just like the simplest little Integromat thing. And then I have big clients that I'm setting up full custom apps, like front end, back end API, all that, and everyone in between. So definitely from a time and cost perspective, I might not want to set up a server for some client who just has a 3-hour budget, say. I might want to maybe do some Firebase stuff with them. Or a bigger client, I might, I might tell them right out the gate, like, hey, let's not do Airtable. I think you guys are going to outgrow it too quickly. So I've seen in the real world, not on just like Twitter arguments, you see that it's not so much of a black and white thing where it's just one is better than the other.
Yeah.
There's times and places for both. And I think they're both powerful. I don't think code's going anywhere. There's a lot of cool developments happening in the code space. and with the serverless stuff, which is kind of low code in between. So I've always seen some of those arguments on Twitter, and I've kind of rolled my eyes at it. People
Yeah.
arguing back and forth, because I feel like if they're actually working with both, they wouldn't have such a like divisive attitude, just because they're both so useful, you know?
Yeah, exactly. And I think sometimes people just see a website builder, a simple one, and think that's no code, and then they look at other really code heavy things and think that's code, and then there's no like middle ground, but really there's like a real big sea in the middle of these intricate things that you can pull things together and change stuff around. So yeah, I guess I'm quite interested in the fact that you do both. And is it like with clients, I suppose, as an agency, is it a case that you promote no code as the way you build stuff to do it cheaper, quicker, and things like that, and then recommend against it if the client's needs sort of go that way, or how does that conversation go with the client?
Yeah, so it's case by case, and I've hesitated on branding myself as like a no code agency quite yet, because I kind of don't want to pigeonhole, and also like there's just going to be situations where you realize you can't do it all with no code, at least right now, mostly scale wise. So yeah, like for example, I had one client who wanted just kind of database set up, and potentially was looking at Airtable, and I said, you know, how many transactions do you have? And it was, you know, 200,000 or something a year. So I was like, okay, well, you know, you're going to get 3 months on Airtable before you grow out of it.
Yeah.
So those people, I just go right to a SQL DB. And there's a lot of really cheap, easy ways to do that now. You know, DigitalOcean lets you set up a managed DB pretty easily. And, you know, Google and AWS both have their own versions of that. So it's not, even the code route is not always a big deal, you know?
No.
So it's really, yeah, case by case. Just talk about volume, you know, cost is a thing, obviously. But, you know, there's plenty of tools for kind of every use case, which is with the good news.
Yeah. Do you think some of these bigger players, Google and stuff, are going to make I suppose Google is taking notice of no code by acquiring AppSheet and things like that. But I wonder if we're going to see more of a bridge between, like, how do I set up your own database, and it's more of a no coder way of doing it, and it's a bit more friendly. I know it is simple if you know what you're doing, but maybe there's more like a different UI that may be needed. I wonder if you think that's going to happen soon, or maybe quite a way away, or not at all.
Yeah, I don't know. I definitely think that gap's going to get bridged gradually. That's kind of a lot of this serverless stuff that's really big. I mean, AWS and Google are obviously have like huge volume in that space now. I think part of that is, you know, the whole reason for that is people don't want to set up their own server every time potentially. So that's kind of a move towards the no code direction in itself. So they're definitely moving that way. And I am interested because there is still kind of like a gap between, I think, even the serverless stuff and the no code, that maybe, yeah, Google, I can't speak for them, but they could be maybe moving a little bit further down that road, to the point where, you know, I've always thought it'd be cool if you had some sort of kind of app scaffolder where you just say, all right, hey, I want a Zapier backend, Airtable DB. I want to do a little bit of JavaScript on these endpoints, and like go scaffold that out for me. And because there's a lot of things in the code space that kind of do that, where you'll pick a DB, MySQL or Postgres, and you know, JavaScript or Python, and then you pick a front end framework, and it kind of spits out some code for you. Nothing like that really exists in the no code space yet. Although I definitely think that that's going to change. So yeah, it's interesting. Google and Amazon, I think they're definitely focused on the code stuff for now, but who knows what they're always up to something.
Yeah, sure. It's funny you say that, having the sort of the template thing, or the almost like here's all the components. You want a database, do you want to use Google Sheets or Airtable? You select one, and then you say, I want Zapier or Integromat for the linking of services. That's something I thought of building. I mean, I couldn't build it. I would have had to find someone to build it. But that's something I thought of building. Must have been a year and a half ago or something before Megapad. That was like one thing that I thought. I think I saw someone do it for code anyway. You can just like you can spin up some of these things, just select a bunch of stuff, and then it's already like created for you. It's got you started, and I really wonder how people could do that now with some of these no code tools.
Yeah, and I'm happy to help if you want to spin that back up.
Yeah. Well, yeah, maybe. I'm not sure we've got the time at the moment, but yeah, it would be an interesting project for sure. Do you think there's going to be like a huge push of people who can develop and understand the no code push and sort of build stuff to help no coders realize that, okay, maybe I will get to a point where I need to move off Airtable and I'll need like a service or a product to help me do that. Or even if it was like what Airtable's like the record limit for a base is like 50,000 or something where it starts breaking. I wonder if there's like space for some developers to come in, and then as you get to that stage, it just sort of duplicates the base for you and then like brings in all the same stuff and then doesn't break your Webflow site and your Zapier things. I wonder if there's like going to be like intermediate in the middle products there.
Something that kind of auto scales, kind of how these cloud providers, I guess that's the big benefit to AWS and, you know, DigitalOcean and all them, is that they kind of just scale up for you.
Yeah.
So yeah, that would be interesting. You know, maybe you could just be constantly syncing Airtable with an offline, you know, NoSQL or SQL DB, and maybe there's something there. I don't know. That'd be an interesting thing to figure out.
Yeah, for sure. I'll leave it to you and anyone else who wants to figure those things out. But that'll be a request from me. I'd definitely be interested in having that. I mean, even for backup's sake, right? It's like it's always nice to know that you have everything in backups other than just on the tools. And do you think people are right to be worried about the scalability of no code at the moment, or?
Yeah, at the moment, I would definitely say that's the biggest weakness there. And I'm saying at the moment, you know, who knows, that might change, and I expect it to. But in my case, that was always the limitation for me. That's why I moved into code. That's why I moved into SQL. That's why I set up a server, you know, because I just got to the point where there was no choice. I would have been paying, you know, hundreds, if not 1,000 a month for, you know, if I was paying by the task. Just because I was doing some heavy data stuff, and that's really going to depend on your business. You know, in my case, I had a lot of small transactions, so my Airtable filled up with like some of them were $3 transactions, right? If you're a lawyer, say, like I've worked with a few clients in law, and you know, each line in their Airtable might be a $15,000 engagement, right? So by the time that guy maxes out Airtable, he's doing pretty good, right? He probably doesn't have to worry about that as much. And I'll help him move to I'm happy to help him move to a SQL DB when he gets to that point. So it all depends. I've always been kind of jealous of businesses like that were less data heavy, because I knew they could stay in the no code space longer. Although it was nice, it was a good excuse for me to learn the code. So I guess I don't regret that. But yeah, scalability, to answer your question, that's definitely got to get up a little bit. You know, like we just talked about the Airtable example. I think even now they have it's 5 per second is their API rate limit. So if you were backing up even a 5,000 or a 50K base, you know, I don't even know how you would really do that in a time effective way. So there's just little stuff like that.
Yeah, I do wonder that some of the conversations around scaling are a bit premature, in that often it's the people who aren't quite there, like not at the point of needing to worry, that they're worrying about scalability of like having 10,000 users doing something on their platform where it maybe not built yet or launched. And I think, yeah, one of the superpowers of no code is it's okay to build something on one stack first and get to your 100,000, 10,000 customers, and then you've got money, time, and an idea of how the product works on the back as well as the front to be able to go to a developer and not just say, oh, I'm thinking of building like a social site. It's like, okay, this is the site, this is how it works. These are like the paths for everyone to take. We have 10,000 users. We need it to work because it breaks on these things. I think that's like a really, really big, valuable piece that maybe gets overlooked, but I don't know whether it's happened enough for these stories to like come out and talk to people about them.
Yeah. So, and I'd say you just pointed out there, whereas I say scalability is probably no code's biggest weakness at this point. I'd say the setup is definitely its biggest strength. Like you mentioned, yeah, there are people who probably should just be spinning up a Webflow. And I mean, I'm kind of guilty of that with some of my smaller stuff. I just really like coding now. So, and I've been working with this front end framework. It's called Svelte. It's kind of this hip new framework, and Tailwind CSS to Adam Wathan. I don't know if you know him. Yeah. So he's coding with those two. They're kind of optimized for developer experience. It's just really a nice experience to code it, and kind of saves you a lot of boilerplate. So I just kind of like it, and I'll reach for code probably admittedly too much. There are probably some times where I should just spin up a card or a Webflow for small things like that. And I think you brought that up in your debate, was that, knowing how to code could maybe even be a weakness in some of those points where you might be a little too tempted to reach for it when maybe you shouldn't. And I'm probably guilty of that at times. So yeah, that's definitely a strength.
Yeah, I think sometimes it depends on who the person is and what the project is. Because if it's like a side project, for me, if I was doing any side projects at the moment, like part of the thing that I like is building that landing page and that user experience of how do these things link together? How does stuff link with Zapier? How can I test it? How can I build like a new feature? Like that's the stuff I like to build and like play around with and do that stuff. It may not be the most productive, but not everything has to be, right? Like if you enjoy coding and you're spinning up some side project stuff, like we should always be happy about that or fine with it. Like it's not so much that, oh no, you did the wrong thing there, you should have done that. So I think people have got to realize, do what you like to do with the tools that you like to do it in the way that you want to do it. Like do all that stuff.
Yeah, definitely. At the end of the day, your best tool is going to be the one you enjoy using.
Yes.
So if you hate Webflow or you hate, Squarespace or whatever, and you like coding, then do that. You're going to be better off. Because if you hate using something, it doesn't matter how easy or quick it is, you're never going to use it. So just got to find that. That's another reason why there's no need really for versus in this space. It's so user specific.
Yeah, for sure. What are the, like running an agency, what other interesting examples have you seen of no code? And maybe you're more specific in that you can give us an insight of like no code looking to get closer to code. Like I wonder if there's any more examples of that you've seen.
Yeah, well, one that stands out is Retool. I'm sure you're familiar with Retool. So that's very interesting to me, especially because, it's kind of like, hey, if you know how to code, go nuts, because they let you can have, custom SQL, attach any data source, including Airtable via API if you want. JavaScript, you can put JS anywhere you want on the form, any kind of logic, which I've had to set that up just because I had some clients using Airtable where they wanted kind of conditional logic, which is something just Airtable's not built to do yet, at least. So that's always been, Retool has been really interesting to me as kind of a one-stop shop for have, given you a front end, because that's a big thing most people need is a front end, right? Because and that until recently was a lot harder to spin up, I think, for more app like stuff. Squarespace wasn't built for apps really.
Yeah.
It's for portfolio sites and whatnot. So yeah, Retool's one I've noticed. There are a few others. I'm blanking on the names, but I've seen some services that are basically like a Zapier Integromat, where they have all these modules, Slack, Airtable, but they basically scaffold out the API code for you, and then you can just inject Node.js in there. So it's kind of like a Zapier, but for coders kind of thing. And I know Zapier has a JavaScript module as well.
Is that standard library?
Standard library is one of them. There's another I'm blanking on. Standard library, I haven't gone back and played with these in a while. The ones I was playing with, they didn't have too many integrations yet. It seemed like it was kind of early in the game, so I kind of abandoned them for now. But I do need to go back around and kind of check on them.
Yeah. Standard library's done. Autocode has been their latest one, which just like spins out the actual code so you can see it. That's quite an interesting thing that, I need to get more time to play around with projects because, I want to go deep into Retool and Standard Library, both of which are MakerPad partners. So we want to do more like education pieces there. So maybe we should hit you up of helping us out with some of the Retool stuff.
Yeah, I'd be happy to work on it. I actually don't have any clients doing Retool right now, so I've kind of been dying to play with it, but haven't had. Unfortunately, just can't seem to get a client who wants to, who's like building something in there yet. So I'm definitely looking for an excuse to play with it.
Awesome. Yeah, well, we'll definitely do that. Is there anything else you want to wrap up with?
No, I don't. I think we covered most of it.
Awesome.
Appreciate you having me on. It was a good talk. Again, I think the space is exciting, both on the code and no code side, and in that middle ground that I think is going to start getting filled in a little bit. So that's the good news is I think we're going to see a lot of innovation all over the place.
Yeah, definitely. I agree. Yeah, I really appreciate you coming on. Do you want to just tell the people where they can find you and everything else?
So company sites, buildlab.co, mwilliams.co is my personal site. And then Twitter, I'm at Mike Though, THOUGH. I'm not very active on Twitter yet. I have like no posts. I just read stuff on there. Although, DMs are open. Feel free to reach out if you're working on something cool. I definitely do want to start being a little more interactive. And that's why I'm kind of happy to be getting involved with MakerPad and some of these other communities. Just because I've been a solopreneur for so long, I'm kind of just, locked up in my office most of the time, haven't been as interactive as probably I should be. And hope to maybe even put out, some content one day. So maybe in that low code hybrid space that obviously you have plenty of content on the no code space, but maybe there's a place I could contribute there. So
yeah, for sure. Well, we'd love to have you help us with that for sure.
Mm-hmm. Yeah. Thanks again, man.
Well, yeah, thanks for coming on. I'll chat to you soon.